When I first moved to Pine Ridge Estates, I imagined a peaceful, if slightly over-regulated, life. The kind of neighborhood where the lawns were always neatly trimmed, porch lights came on at precisely dusk, and the biggest drama involved seasonal flag placement or Halloween decorations that didn't align with community standards. I was wrong. Behind the freshly painted fences and pristine sidewalks lurked a seething undercurrent of control, judgment, and thinly veiled power plays. At the center of it all stood Linda Harrington, a woman whose mere presence could cause a block-wide sigh. My plan was to stay low-key, get involved just enough to not stand out, and let the rules be someone else's problem. But Linda had other ideas. She had a sixth sense for new neighbors, and her fixation on enforcing her personal version of order was not something anyone could avoid for long. What started as a passive acquaintance turned, slowly and then all at once, into a personal war. A war I never asked for, but one I wouldn't walk away from. I met Linda 2 hours after I signed the closing documents on my house. I was hauling a box of winter clothes out of my Jeep when she materialized in my driveway, wearing a pastel pantsuit and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Hello there," she said, voice sweet and sharp as a razor blade. "I'm Linda Harrington, HOA President and School Board Treasurer. Welcome to Pine Ridge Estates." She handed me a thick binder labeled Community Compliance Guidelines, the weight of it surprising me. It thudded in my hands like a legal warning disguised as a gift. "I just wanted to make sure you were properly informed from the start," she added, gesturing toward the binder like it was the Bible. "We take pride in our neighborhood." Her eyes drifted past me to the box in my arms, the back of my Jeep, my slightly wilted welcome mat, cataloging, judging. I gave her a polite smile and said thank you, though something in her tone made my skin crawl. I had a feeling Linda wasn't just a neighbor. She was a gatekeeper. And I was already on her radar, and the following weeks, I kept my head down. I unpacked, I landscaped, I even flipped through that monstrous binder and tried to follow its Orwellian rules. No wind chimes, only beige and forest green for exterior accents, lawn height precisely 2 inches. I tried to be invisible, but Linda's gaze was omnipresent. I'd catch her watching from her bay window when I took out the trash, her phone in hand like she was documenting infractions. Once, I returned home from work to find a note taped to my mailbox. Friendly reminder, mailboxes should be repainted annually. Yours is beginning to dull. It wasn't signed, but I knew. The kicker? It had only been up for 2 days. Linda had the kind of energy that made you question your own sanity, calm, calculated, and always just passive enough to avoid open confrontation. Still, I bit my tongue and waved politely when I passed her. I had no desire to be her next project. But the tension was growing, silent, simmering, and bound to boil over. The breaking point came at the first school board meeting I attended. My daughter had just started at Pine Ridge Elementary, and I wanted to get involved, to be part of something positive. I pitched a new idea for the annual fundraiser, a spring carnival complete with games, local vendors, and a silent auction. It would be fun, inclusive, and had the potential to raise far more than the tired spaghetti dinners of the past. The moment I finished my pitch, Linda cleared her throat, her smile frosty. "We've done spaghetti night for 12 years, she said, looking around the room for backup. "People expect tradition." I could feel the air thicken. I stood my ground, explaining the budget and the expanded reach, how it could engage more families. Linda didn't interrupt again, but her eyes stayed locked on mine the entire time, her fingers tapping a slow, steady rhythm against her clipboard. It wasn't just resistance, it was resentment. I had stepped onto her turf and dared to bring new ideas. I didn't realize it then, but that meeting marked the beginning of our open conflict. Linda didn't like change. And she especially didn't like anyone challenging her control. Things escalated quickly after that. A few mornings later, I stepped outside with my coffee and found Linda standing at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed. "I've noticed you've been parking your Jeep there quite a bit," she said without so much as a greeting. "It's not exactly in line with the aesthetic of the neighborhood." I blinked, baffled. "You mean in my own driveway?" She nodded solemnly, like this was a moral dilemma. "It's very large. Aggressive-looking. We try to maintain a certain curb appeal here." My Jeep was a perfectly normal vehicle, if a little rugged. But to Linda, it was visual pollution. "We prefer residents park in their garages when possible." I glanced at my one-car garage, already stuffed with moving boxes. "I'll take that under advisement," I said tightly and walked back inside. But she didn't stop there. That week, I received my first official HOA violation: improper vehicle storage. Linda had officially declared war. And I realized that trying to avoid conflict was no longer an option. She wasn't going to stop. Not until I either broke or pushed back. The violation notices began arriving with the regularity of junk mail, each one signed with a digital HOA signature but reeking of Linda's condescension. One warned me about unauthorized seasonal decor because I'd hung a small metal sun above my front door, something I'd bought during a road trip in Santa Fe. Another cited excessively aggressive vehicle presence, a term so ridiculous I laughed when I first read it. According to the notice, my Jeep projected an image inconsistent with neighborhood values. I half expected the next one to condemn my doormat for promoting rebellious energy. The absurdity wasn't even the worst part. It was the steady, relentless grind of being watched, judged, and punished for every minor deviation from her invisible rulebook. I saw her more often now, lurking with that clipboard, her eyes narrowed as if calculating my every misstep. Neighbors started looking at me sideways, and I could feel the whispers at the mailbox cluster. "She's not complying. She's rocking the boat." I tried to brush it off, but each notice chipped at me. Linda wasn't just being annoying, she was trying to break me down, wear me into submission. But I dealt with worse. And I was just getting it wasn't enough for Linda to target me at home. Soon, she began making power plays at school. She still held her position as treasurer, but now she subtly shifted roles in meetings, assigning me the most tedious, soul-crushing tasks: coordinating name tags, cleaning up after events, chasing down families who hadn't returned permission slips. She'd say things like, "You're so detail-oriented, I thought you'd be perfect for the inventory list," or, "Since you're not working full-time, I figured you'd have the flexibility." I was a single mother juggling remote consulting work and parenting. Flexibility was a cruel joke. But if I pushed back, she'd flash her saccharine smile and accuse me of being uncooperative or unsupportive of the board's vision. Worse, she began quietly rewriting minutes, removing my suggestions or crediting others for my ideas. At one point, she even claimed she had initiated the carnival plan after seeing it online. The gaslighting was surgical. I could feel the walls closing in, school, home, everywhere. Linda wasn't just a control freak, she was playing chess. But she was underestimating how far I'd go to protect what mattered to me. I wasn't on the board to make friends. I was there to make sure my daughter, and every other kid, got the best. And that meant going through Linda, if I had to. Despite every obstacle she threw at me, the carnival went forward. I spent weeks planning, coordinating, and calling in every favor I had. Parents stepped up, especially the ones tired of Linda's tired routines. We had local businesses donate prizes, a food truck row, even a dunk tank that raised hundreds by itself. The principal bravely took a few splashes. It was a hit. The laughter of children echoed through the schoolyard, families lingered long after sunset, and when we counted the money, we had raised more than triple the amount of any previous fundraiser. $18,000 to be exact. I watched Linda's face as the total was announced at the next meeting. Her eyes didn't flicker. Her smile remained fixed. But her fingers gripped her pen so tightly, I thought it might snap. "That's impressive," she finally said, her voice as flat as week-old soda. "Though I do wonder if the carnival format is sustainable." Her attempt to downplay it fell flat. Parents clapped. Teachers nodded. I had taken her turf, her tradition, and outdone it. And I had done it without kissing her ring. That success painted a target on my back brighter than ever. But it also gave me allies and confidence. Linda had made it personal. And now, so had I that I thought the worst was behind me after the carnival, but Linda wasn't finished. One night, around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a furious banging at my front door. My heart raced. I thought something terrible had happened. I rushed downstairs, flipped on the porch light, and there she was, Linda, in a bathrobe and slippers, arms crossed, scowling like I'd stolen Christmas. "You need to move your Jeep," she snapped. I blinked in confusion. "Now." "Yes, now. My son and his friends are visiting, and we need the extra space." I stared at her, stunned. "You want my driveway?" She didn't flinch. It's not about ownership, it's about community cooperation. I laughed, an actual, disbelieving laugh. It is about ownership. It's my property. Her face flushed a shade darker, and her voice dropped to a hiss. If you don't move it, I will call someone who can. I shut the door without another word. The audacity was staggering, even for her. This wasn't just pettiness anymore, it was obsession. I locked my door, called the non-emergency police line to report the disturbance, and sat by the window, watching her pace my front yard like a demon banished from a summoning circle. I didn't sleep that night. But something had changed. Linda had crossed a line, and I now had proof. The very next morning, my doorbell rang at 6:43 a.m. I opened the door to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. My stomach dropped. One of them spoke in a calm, professional tone. "Ma'am, we received a report of trespassing. Are you aware of any issues involving your vehicle and your neighbor?" It took everything in me not to explode. I explained what had happened the night before, that Linda had demanded I vacate my own driveway and had threatened to call someone. The officers nodded, exchanging a glance. One pulled out a tablet, showed me the 911 call transcript. "She claimed you were blocking access to communal space. But after reviewing the lot plans and your security footage," I blinked, surprised. "Yes, we saw the ring cam footage you uploaded to the report last night." They had reviewed it. Linda was clearly shown yelling and demanding access to private property. "You're in the clear," one officer said. "But if this continues, we suggest filing a formal complaint. This isn't the first time we've been called to this neighborhood." They left, and I stood there, a mix of anger and grim satisfaction rising in my chest. Linda had used every tool in her arsenal: social power, school board manipulation, and now law enforcement. But this time, she'd gone too far. And now I had everything I needed to push back. I spent the next 48 hours gathering everything: every HOA notice, every email, every screenshot from the school board chat, and most importantly, the ring camera footage from the midnight confrontation. I typed up a formal complaint addressed to both the HOA Council and the School Board Oversight Committee. It wasn't a rant. It was a meticulous timeline of harassment, abuse of power, and targeted retaliation. I included the police report from the false 911 call, highlighted Linda's manipulative role in the school board, and laid bare the pettiness disguised as policy enforcement. I also attached a transcript from our fundraising meetings, pointing out discrepancies in Linda's financial reporting, something I hadn't noticed until I started digging. The numbers didn't add up. I submitted everything through official channels, knowing full well it would rattle cages. This wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was about principle. About the quiet way people like Linda abuse their authority and leave others to silently suffer. I hit send, exhaled slowly, and braced myself. Linda had poked and prodded and undermined me for months, but now she was facing something she hadn't anticipated. The investigation moved faster than I expected, probably because I wasn't the only one who'd had enough. Other parents started speaking up. A former treasurer anonymously shared her own suspicions from years back. The HOA board, sensing the storm gathering, scrambled to cover themselves but couldn't ignore the paper trail. It turned out Linda had been quietly funneling leftover school fundraiser money into community enhancement projects managed by the HOA, a line item no one had questioned because of her dual role. But those enhancements included catered HOA events, yard maintenance for friends, and, my personal favorite, payments to a local printing shop for glossy brochures promoting her upcoming bid for city council. It was all there: transfers, invoices, her name on every approval line. The total: over $23,000 misappropriated over 2 years. When the findings were presented to the Oversight Committee, I was invited to the meeting. I watched as Linda's face shifted from smug certainty to icy panic while the numbers were read aloud. She tried to deflect, claiming clerical error, misunderstanding, unintentional overlaps in roles, but the evidence was airtight. Her perfect reputation cracked like porcelain under a ham. The HOA held an emergency session just 3 days later. The room was packed. Neighbors who had once politely avoided my eyes now sat upright, eyes wide, listening as the board chair read the findings aloud. Linda stood at the front, arms crossed, that same frozen smile she always wore at the beginning of every confrontation. But this time, no one clapped. No one nodded. The final statement was short: due to repeated abuse of power, harassment of a fellow resident, and inappropriate use of HOA resources, we are removing Linda Harrington as president effective immediately." A murmur rippled through the room. Linda tried to object, citing process and bylaws, but no one listened. The board had already voted, unanimously. They offered her the option to step down gracefully. She refused. So they removed her formally, right then and there. I watched as she collected her folder and clipboard, her armor, and stormed out without another word. For the first time since I'd moved in, the air in Pine Ridge Estates felt different. Lighter. Like the neighborhood had been holding its breath for years, and now, finally, it was exhaling. But the fallout didn't stop there. At the next public school board meeting, the Financial Oversight Committee presented their own findings. In front of a full auditorium of parents, teachers, and community members, they laid out the misuse of school funds. The mood was tense. Linda sat stiffly at the table, no longer at the center of power but now a subject of scrutiny. "We estimate $23,467 in funds were diverted," the auditor announced. Some of this money was never reported to the board. Some was redirected under vague expense categories. All of it violated district policy. They gave her a choice: repay the full amount or face legal consequences. When someone in the back muttered, "Finally," the room laughed, but Linda didn't. She refused to speak. When asked directly if she would resign, she stood up, adjusted her scarf, and muttered something about witch hunts and political enemies. But the damage was done. The board formally removed her from the treasurer position, pending a full audit. A motion to ban her from holding any future leadership roles passed without a single dissenting vote. Justice, slow but sharp, had arrived. She didn't take it well. Rumors spread fast: how she slammed her car door so hard it dented the frame, how she screamed at a neighbor the next morning for betraying her. A for sale sign appeared in her front yard within the week. But before she could fade away quietly, she had one final meltdown. At a neighborhood town hall, the kind she used to rule with passive-aggressive glares and overbaked cookies, Linda showed up uninvited and unannounced. She marched straight to the front, demanded the microphone, and launched into a disjointed tirade about corruption, disrespect, and how certain people had turned the neighborhood into a circus. No one stopped her. No one interrupted. We all just watched. It was surreal, like watching a villain in a movie unravel in real time. When she finally finished, there was no applause, just silence. She slammed the mic down and stormed out, her reign officially over. That night, for the first time in months, I slept with the windows open and the lights off. Peace had finally returned to Pine Ridge Estates. The tyrant was gone. And in the quiet that followed, you could almost hear the neighborhood breathe again.